Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tobian. I will retell the plot of the book for you. Vasily Golovachev, The Shadow of Lucifer's Wing. Summit 1, Newcomer, Chapter 6. Nikita couldn't settle down the whole day. Takeda, as stubborn as ever, didn't explain much to him, only muttering that everything will work out. And if not, then, he said, they'd have to somehow introduce the dancer to the reality of the Veil of Worlds. Nikita had no idea what that even meant. But he already knew that when Tolik decided something, nothing would come out of him unless he himself wanted it. So, Nikita didn't really expect to learn anything until Tolik lifted his information moratorium. Tolik said he'd come in the evening and told Nikita to stay put and not go anywhere. He also took the dancer's car to the service center himself. Had Tolik known that Nikita had already seen how this mysterious implantation worked, he definitely wouldn't have left him alone. By 8 in the evening, Nikita started to feel an odd sense that he wasn't alone in the apartment, as though someone was secretly watching him. Remembering that his regular phone had already been acting strangely, he took precautions and set up an old spare phone. He even mocked himself a little, he was an adult, yet scared. But still, he walked around the apartment, checked the living room, bedroom, and kitchen. He found no one, but the feeling of being watched only grew stronger, and soon he almost slipped into quiet panic. He even whispered, "Who's here?" Breaking into a cold sweat, and just in case, he grabbed the nunchaku from the cupboard that Takeda had once given him. He handled them with surprising confidence. Then, suddenly, the air in the room seemed to freeze, becoming as dense as glass. Nikita felt like an insect trapped in amber, and instinctively, he jerked. The density lifted, but because of the sharp movement, he clumsily struck himself with the nunchaku on the shoulder, right where the strange star of the message had shifted. Nikita suddenly felt a sharp pain, from his arm to his head, it all pricked, and his vision darkened. And deep within his skull, a booming voice shouted out strange words, Ilif. Lam. Mim. Nikita, of course, didn't understand anything and weakly asked, "What?" The voice faded, but something strange had happened to his eyes. He suddenly began to see everything around him with a glowing yellow halo. And only one thing in the room glowed with an unsettling red, a ceramic vase that resembled an ancient amphora. In Nikita's mind, it was as if something had clicked, like a curtain falling, revealing the true picture. And then, his body reacted faster than his mind, he instinctively threw himself to the floor. At that very moment, the vase exploded like a grenade. If he hadn't fallen, he would have surely been shredded by the shards. As it was, he got off relatively easy, a few fragments sliced open his back, and the chair, as he fell, scraped across his neck. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and then someone started knocking. Nikita barely managed to get up and staggered to the hallway. On the doorstep stood his neighbor, a plump woman with thin, dyed hair, and she immediately started yelling at him, asking what kind of chaos he had caused, whether he was testing a cannon or something. Apparently, even a painting had fallen off her wall. Nikita barely managed to say that it was just a broken vase, apologized, and quickly slammed the door shut, eager to escape her further complaints about how he was always playing loud music, dropping metal objects, or inviting suspicious guests. He then returned to the living room, collected the broken vase and glass shards. The bookcase doors had also been damaged, and set the lamp and chairs back in place. Afterward, he went to the bathroom, took off his shirt, and began cleaning himself up, trying to stop the blood that was oozing from the cuts on his back. It was at that moment that Takeda arrived. He let out a whistle when he saw the state Nikita was in. Takeda, seeing Nikita covered in cuts, joked, asking if he had been fighting with cats. Nikita calmly replied that no, it was with a vase. He was still in mild shock and spoke about the explosion as if nothing unusual had happened. Tolya immediately tensed up, his eyes narrowed, and he said that he had suspected it was an implantation. That meant Nikita wouldn't be left alone, even if he didn't learn anything. Then he asked how Nikita had even noticed the danger, hinting at the red halo around the vase. Nikita explained that it felt like some kind of internal call, and he had already felt it twice, both times after touching the strange star. He had instinctively thrown himself to the floor without having time to think about it. Takeda paused and said that it was clear the message was making its presence known. It usually doesn't communicate with those it wasn't meant for. It seemed that Nikita was gradually starting to tune into it. At that point, Nikita remembered another odd thing. Before the explosion, he had heard some incomprehensible words, Ilif, Lam, Mim, and he asked Takeda what kind of gibberish that was. Takeda explained that the phrase was from the Quran. Then, he recalled that Bunin had also mentioned it in one of his poems. He even quoted a part of it to Nikita, in such a deep, guttural voice that Nikita felt goosebumps run down his skin. The poem spoke of a mysterious motto inscribed on a blade, which was exactly, Ilif, Lam, Mim. Nikita, superstitious, spat over his shoulder. Everything about it was just too strange. He immediately asked, "All right, but what does this phrase actually mean?" Takeda admitted that he didn't really know, he wasn't an expert on the Quran. That made Nikita even more puzzled. Why had the message given him exactly those words? What was the meaning behind them? Takeda replied that Nikita would have to find the meaning himself. And once he understood it, his true journey on the path would begin, whether he liked it or not. For now, he gave some advice, to listen more carefully to the message, because it might save his life. Nikita asked Takeda if that old man had really given him some kind of magical gift. But Takeda just shook his head and said it wasn't a gift, it was almost a curse. He wished Nikita strength, so he could endure everything ahead and not break. Nikita turned pale and glanced at the strange star on his shoulder, which had now reached the moles resembling the number 7s. Takeda understood without a word and let out a heavy sigh. He asked, "Do you still want me to tell you everything?" Nikita first swallowed hard, pinched the bridge of his nose, but then looked at Takeda with determination. It was probably his pride that stirred within him, and Takeda knew that for people like him, pride could be a powerful motivator. Nikita said, "Tell me everything. It's better to lose with someone wise than to find with someone foolish." Takeda thanked Nikita for his resolve but immediately pointed out that he was still selfish. Nikita was surprised. "For what?" Takeda explained, "I warned you, the knowledge you seek not only endangers you but also those close to you. And you didn't even think about Ksenia or your mother." Nikita immediately grew alarmed. "What's happened to them?" Takeda calmed him a little. "They're fine for now. Ksenia has gone far away, and you could say she's out of harm's reach, especially because she has psychic abilities. As for your mother, you'll need to pay her more attention." Nikita, flushed with shame and anger, turned away, but then gathered himself and asked, "Where is she?" Tolya replied that his mother would contact him herself, but only if Nikita managed to take control of the situation. And the path to that would be long, difficult, and very dangerous. Takeda explained to Nikita that this wasn't about the path itself, but only the road leading to it. They both fell silent, each lost in their own doubts, but neither showed it. Nikita kept thinking about Ksenia. It hurt that she had left without even saying goodbye. Then he asked about the star. Was it like a real message? Takeda confirmed, yes, it was encoded information, very valuable. And if Nikita learned not only to hear it but also to decipher it. Nikita couldn't hold back, so what then? Tolya shrugged, I don't know. Maybe you'll become a midge, maybe you'll just go mad. Is that kind of fate acceptable to you? Then he said, get ready. Nikita was surprised, where to? Tolya replied that they were going to his place. He had equipment there that would allow them to talk without the risk of anyone listening in. When Nikita asked if he could at least bandage his back, Tolya waved him off, it'll heal on its own. Get dressed, and let's go. Takeda wasn't in a hurry and set up a tea ceremony. Like a true Japanese, he loved rituals. Nikita didn't mind having some tea either, but this time he could barely sit still, his curiosity getting the best of him. It wasn't until almost 11 in the evening that they finally moved to the engineer's office. Tolya turned on the computer and briefly said, noise generator. At first, Nikita didn't understand, so Tolya explained that this device creates electromagnetic interference, making it impossible for anyone to eavesdrop, even with clever lasers. They settled into low chairs with dragon patterns, and Nikita suddenly felt a sense of fear, like before a very complicated jump. Takeda noticed this and nodded, acknowledging that he, too, was nervous. He suggested that maybe they shouldn't confess after all, perhaps everything would resolve itself. But Nikita rasped in response that it didn't matter anymore, his heart was already heavy, and it couldn't get worse. They began discussing serious matters. One of them remarked that things would only get worse, but since they had started, they needed to see it through. He warned that the explanation would be complicated and asked Nikita to ask questions right away if anything was unclear. He began by taking a long, slow approach, reminding Nikita that the universe was born roughly 12–15 billion years ago as a result of the Big Bang. Scientists believe the explosion occurred in two stages. First, everything expanded rapidly, then a second process followed, after which the universe became like soap bubbles. Each bubble in this foam represents a vast area with its own set of physical laws. Our Earth is located in one of these bubbles and occupies a tiny fraction of it. Nikita understood all of this. He had once been fascinated by cosmology. Then the storyteller continued, in reality, it's even more complicated. These bubbles aren't just next to each other, they are nested inside each other, like Russian dolls. And they can't interact with one another, because time flows at different angles in each. The result is a multilayered structure, where each layer is a separate version of the universe. Altogether, they refer to this as the fan of worlds. Takeda looked at Nikita, he was barely holding it together but asked him to continue. They exchanged a few words about tastes in books, and then Takeda resumed his explanation. He explained that when the fan of worlds unfolded, life began in each layer or world, governed by its own laws of physics. In some of these worlds, life emerged, and in others, intelligence evolved to such an extent that the beings almost became gods, beings Takeda referred to as the rulers. Nikita was trying to grasp how all of this was connected, but Takeda asked him not to interrupt. He said the most important part was yet to come. It turned out that in one of these worlds, someone had emerged so powerful that they could cross the boundaries between worlds and travel throughout the fan of worlds. But the problem was, this superintelligence broke the highest laws established by the rulers. Instead of living by principles of good and love, they chose to intervene. In one of the empty worlds, they created the absolute chaos. Yes, with a capital letter. Nikita tried to clarify what was meant by chaos, something like disorder and entropy, as in the Bible, everything came from chaos and will return to it. Takeda, with a touch of irony, praised his knowledge and explained, in reality, chaos is not simply a dead end or the end of everything. Chaos, on the contrary, is the source of new, even more complex orders. In other words, from chaos can arise very deliberate, intricate structures. But the powerful ruler, the one they had mentioned earlier, decided not to create just any chaos, but the absolute, perfect chaos, which is truly dangerous. They tried to explain to him that this posed a threat not only to his own world but to the entire fan of worlds, but he refused to listen. At that moment, Nikita guessed and asked, "Is this about Lucifer?" Takeda confirmed, yes, it was indeed about him. The fall of Lucifer was not a myth, it was a real event. All who followed him lost their selves. Takeda further clarified that absolute chaos is a system where no order is possible at all, not physical, not mathematical, not political, nothing. And although Lucifer was a brilliant being and truly managed to create chaos, he still failed to calculate all the consequences. In the end, Nikita asked, why did he do it? Takeda explained that Lucifer, in fact, was not the devil in the usual religious sense, nor a villain in the purest form. He was a being of pure intellect, entirely devoid of emotions. He created absolute chaos more out of scientific curiosity, or for reasons unknown. The problem was that this chaos did not remain confined to one world, it began to seep into other worlds, including our own. Even on Earth, it made its presence known. For example, Chernobyl was one of those channels through which the chaos infiltrated. When it became clear that the entire fan of worlds could collapse and perish, the other rulers intervened. There were 7 of them. Combining their powers, they managed to halt the spread of the chaos and cast Lucifer into a place now known as the Swamp of Death. But Lucifer did not give up. He attempted another major sabotage, to release chaos into the vast universe, where myriads of worlds are born and die. He almost succeeded, but once again the 7 were able to intervene. And it was only due to a stroke of fortunate circumstances that the fan of worlds did not collapse into a single point and vanish. In the end, Nikita summarized, so, basically, a philosopher. Apparently somewhat weary of the grand scale of the story. Takeda continued to tell Nikita that after all these events, the 7 rulers gathered for the 3rd time, to save the fan of worlds once more. They had to wage a true war against Lucifer's followers, particularly a group known as the Synclet of the 4 demons. These demons were ready to sacrifice everything, even destroy the entire fan, just to free Lucifer. In the end, about 1,000 years ago, in the last great battle between order and chaos, Lucifer was locked away in one of the worlds, and chaos was contained in another. The 4 demons were restricted, and peace seemed to prevail. But everything turned out to be more complicated. Lucifer is still trying to break free, and there is a suspicion that it will happen soon. Therefore, the rulers decided to assemble a new 7 protectors. There was a messenger, who was supposed to find them, but he was killed. And now, it seems, Nikita may be destined to take his place. Though, as Takeda said, he is not obligated to, yet there is a chance that he will become the new messenger. Moreover, Takeda explained that Lucifer has loyal followers, those same 4 demons, and their people are active even on Earth. It turned out that Nikita had already encountered them in the park. Although magic works weakly on Earth, due to the breathing of chaos, life is still beginning to unravel. disasters, wars, problems, and these are just faint echoes of the true calamity. Nikita tried to process the avalanche of information, but his mind was in turmoil, there was just too much to take in. He asked Takeda if he had made up all these abbreviations, Denitsa, SD, SS, CK. Takeda merely smiled and explained that Chekists were professional hunters after those who tried to hinder Lucifer. Then Nikita asked the main question again, what does he have to do with all this? After all, he had never even heard of the existence of the fan before. Takeda clarified, the point is that there was a herald, he carried important information for the messenger about the search for the new 7 magicians. And there was the messenger himself, who was supposed to find them. But now both had been killed. And now, the message, that very information, somehow, ended up with Nikita. Nikita, horrified, realized, does this mean he is the messenger now? Takeda replied that, for now, no one. Nikita was still too weak for this role, as one of the enemies had rightly pointed out, but he did have a chance to become the messenger. Nikita felt a wave of dizziness from all the news, and Takeda suggested he lie down. Nikita pushed Takeda's hand away, took a deep breath, and sat in silence for a minute, leaning back in the chair. He looked extremely tired, dark circles had appeared under his eyes. Still, he believed everything he had heard. Although deep inside, there was a flicker of hope that this was some kind of prank or strange fantasy. But he knew Tolya too well to believe in such nonsense. Nikita asked if Takeda could stay the night, it would take time to process everything. Takeda silently turned the chair into a bed. But Nikita couldn't sleep, neither after an hour, nor after 2. Neither could Tolya. So Nikita began asking questions again. He asked, not fully understanding, who exactly was the messenger. Tolya explained that his name was Samadal, and he was something like a liaison officer between the lords, or even more like a god of communication. Nikita was surprised, if he was such an important mage, why had he traveled without protection? Tolya was silent for a long time, then reluctantly answered. Tolya said that the exact details were still unclear, but it was most likely that the messenger had been killed because of betrayal, everything had happened too quickly for him to defend himself. After these words, the room fell silent again. All that could be heard was the soft rustling and creaking from within the computer, and occasionally the sound of trams and cars braking outside. Nikita asked, if he did become the messenger, what exactly would he have to do? Tolya explained that the main task of the messenger was to find the lords, the powerful mags who, when gathered together, could create a special force, like a new law of nature for the entire Vale. This force would work for the good of all worlds and could even surpass the abilities of Denitsa. Nikita remarked that Tolya spoke of the mags almost like they were gods. Tolya replied that, in essence, mags and gods were nearly the same thing, if you considered magic to be true knowledge of the laws of nature. But he added that it was too soon for Nikita to think about that. His first task was to perfect his own abilities, and only then could he aim for true magical power. In the darkness, Nikita only smirked and asked, so, the limit, is that the power of a mage? Tolya explained to Nikita that mags were just one step in the development of intelligent beings, and no one really knew the true limit. And if Nikita decided to become the new messenger, a very difficult and dangerous path awaited him. Moreover, he would have to start literally from scratch. Ahead of him lay 3 paths, the path of the sword, the ability to survive in any conditions, the path of thought, the path of gods, the development of the mind, and the path of spirit. And all of them were so complex that they were nearly impossible for an ordinary person. With bitterness, Nikita said, "But I'm just a dancer." Tolya replied that this was no small thing. A dancer was a master of movement, rhythm, and grace, and that was highly valued. He added that the other future lords were also people of art and skill. Some were architects, some sculptors, some warriors, and some even created harmonies that words couldn't describe. And yet, only 4 of them were humans, or something very close to human. The other 3 were beings from entirely different worlds. Tolya said that the rest of it would be revealed to Nikita by the message, the special knowledge he now carried inside. Nikita remained silent. He simply couldn't process all these incredible events anymore. His mind had stopped being surprised. Everything seemed so grand and strange that deep inside, it began to stir up an ancient fear of the unknown. Then Nikita asked, "Why didn't you, Tolya, someone so smart, experienced, and strong, take this path yourself? After all, you're a martial arts master and a serious research engineer." In this part, Takeda explained to Nikita that he wasn't suited for the role of the messenger because it required not just responsible individuals, but vivid, creative personalities. As for him, he said, he was simply an observer who knew only the most mundane things. His role was to accompany the messenger, in this case, Nikita, until he was capable of handling things on his own. When Nikita asked if Takeda was willing to go with him, Takeda replied that it was his duty, and he even pointed to the symbol he wore, 3/8, the emblem of a high duty. Encouraged by this, Nikita calmed down and decided to postpone the conversation until the next day, as he felt himself growing sleepy. But Takeda remained with his doubts. He knew that by pulling Nikita out of his comfortable life, he was offering nothing but fear, pain, and danger, and wasn't sure if Nikita would be able to endure it all.